Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday evening. Um, really excited that you are here, and I'm sitting at Girls Garage. Welcome to Girls Garage. I'll do a little 360 spin in a minute. But yeah, just want to welcome you, and we're going to spend the next hour here for Tool Talk. This is the first time we've done this, but we wanted to create a space where folks could bring their questions about tools or building. I'm Emily. I'm the founder and executive director of Girls Garage, and I know some of you personally who are students here. I see some familiar names from our community. And yeah, just, I know everyone's like a little fed up with Zoom, but we're always excited to bring folks together to talk about building. And especially as we're all spending more time at home and looking around and wanting to fix and build things. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Girls Garage, and then I'm going to introduce my colleague and BFF, Allison. So I'm sitting here at Girls Garage, and like I said, I'm the founder and executive director. I'm going to do a little 360 spin that hopefully isn't vertigo inducing. I'm sitting here against our tool wall, and tools, tools, tools. Here's our chop saw and our slogan on the wall. And then I'm going to spin the other way slowly so we don't get dizzy. Ooh. And our main workspace is this way. That's a catapult in progress sitting on the table. Those are some benches over on the floor that we're working on for a community partner. And there's another chop saw. And then upstairs, we have a classroom, and there's some flags we just put up. There's a classroom up there that's also our print shop. So this is, our physical workshop here in West Berkeley. And we welcome hundreds of girls ages 9 to 18 here every year. We teach classes in carpentry and welding and architecture. And all of our classes for teen girls are free. It's a really awesome, diverse, and vibrant community. And we love equipping girls and women and a gender expansive community with all the tools, literal and metaphorical, to build the world we want to see together, and to think about how building is an act of power and voice. And so coming together today is just another way to support that and help sort of demystify some of the things that might feel like you need some support with when it comes to tools. So I'm going to introduce my colleague, Allison Oropallo, who I teach with and who I've built lots of crazy stuff with. And she's a tool expert and an avid builder, as you can tell from that cabinet behind her. So Allison, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Oropallo. I have been with Girls Garage for a very long time now. And my day job is I'm an industrial arts teacher in Marin at Terra Linda High. And I teach engineering, woodshop, construction, and I teach to high school students, grades 9 through 12. I'm originally from upstate New York. I have been in California for the last, 13, 14 years now. I like to consider myself a Californian now. I've been building since I could barely walk. I was obsessed with following my dad around. We renovated many houses and then renovated, moved. And we did all our own work. We very rarely hire anyone. So I learned a lot from my dad. I also worked construction in the summers with my high school shop teacher, who was another idol / mentor of mine. And I hope I followed in his footsteps by becoming a high school shop teacher. So, and yes, I am obsessed with tools. I literally, all I do is watch videos. I'd rather watch videos on how to build stuff than a TV show. And I am constantly redoing things in my house. So I got lucky enough to get a house, and it is literally like my project daily is to improve this house. I just love having this project that you can just constantly make better. But yeah, so I love renovations of homes. I build weird stuff. It's kind of what I do. So I'm really excited for this tool talk, and I'm hoping to be able to answer all your questions. And Emily, is there anything else you'd like me to mention that I forgot? I don't think so.
What are you working on in your house now?
Oh, yeah. So last summer, pandemic summer, no one could go swimming. I live in Petaluma, It was like 100 degrees. I think it got 113 degrees a couple days, and we were so hot that I promised myself that I was going to make a pool in the backyard. So I am currently, it's been every weekend for the last few months, but I currently bought a huge 10-foot stock tank, which is like those big metal troughs that animals drink out of on farms. It's like 2 feet deep. So if you sit in this thing, like you can really lounge. It's great. You can't swim, but you can soak and get cool and, just hang out in water. So I have been doing this project. I had to run all the electrical underground. I had to, it's turning into a bigger project than I originally thought, but it's keeping me busy. So I'm having fun with it. But I just built a deck on it yesterday. I've got a saltwater filter hooked up. It's really pretty awesome. It's looking good. And I'm so excited for my nieces to come swim. It's an excuse that my nieces will come over a lot. So that is my current project.
Among many others.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So a couple more quick things. I want to just give a shout out because I see a couple girls who are here who are a part of our program right now. So I just wanted to say hi to Lauren and to Layla and there was Paloma. Hi, Paloma. Tova. Oh my gosh. If I am missing anyone. And Divya. So Divya Allison is going to be our co-instructor for the workshop you're coming to soon. So really happy you're all here too. Hopefully you brought some family members or friends. And secondly, I always forget to do this. So we published a book last June called Girls Garage. How to use any tool, tackle any project, and build the world you want to see. And so if there are questions that go unanswered in this hour we're going to spend together, this is a 3.5-year project, and it's a pretty robust resource for questions about tools. There's some sample projects. There's some profiles of really awesome builder women, including Allison. There's some essential skills like how to wind up an extension cord without it becoming a rat's nest. So there's a link in the chat if you're interested in buying it. Yeah, and I think that's it for my housekeeping. Yes, so we wanted to just kick this off with a quick little 5-minute dive into some of our favorite tools. And then for any of you who have questions, no matter how specific or weird, please drop them into the chat. And Bethany, who is here somewhere, is going to help field the questions as they come in. So I wanted to just start by saying that one of the things I love most is seeing girls use tools for the first time. And one of the things that we've committed to doing as an organization this year is to provide 100 girls who are in our teen program with a fully stocked toolbox of starter tools. We believe these to be the most essential tools that everyone should have in their toolbox. And so this was part of a fundraiser we did at the end of last year called the Fearless 100. The toolboxes are awesome. I actually want one myself. I'm going to put a link in the chat in case you're curious of the exact products that are in it. They're all DeWalt tools. I think there's close to 20 tools. And so I just thought that'd be a good place to start. We curated this toolbox as sort of a starter kit for people who are interested in both repair and also small scale home building projects. So I'm not going to show all the tools that are in there, but I'm just going to show a couple of my favorites. There's some sort of fundamental safety and layout tools that I think everyone should own. So safety glasses, a must have all the time. We have a rule that anytime you're in the wood shop here, you're wearing safety glasses. There's some measuring devices. We have a speed square and a 25-foot measuring tape. And if you want 2 little fun facts about measuring tapes. So if I pull this out, you'll see that number 16 and then 32 are red. So you might, actually, I'm curious if anyone knows why every 16th inch is red. But if you don't, so 16 inches is the dimension. If you were to have X-ray vision and look into your walls in your house, 16 inches is the spacing of studs in your walls. And so this is a really useful demarcation for carpenters who are trying to mark out exactly where studs go when they're framing a wall. Second fun fact about a tape measure is that a lot of people will get their tape measure and they go, oh, my clip, it's wiggly, it's broken. It's not broken. This is actually both useful and it makes your tape measure more precise. Allison, do you explain why?
Yeah, sure. So I don't have a tape measure in front of me, but so that little wiggle, it wiggles a 1/16 of an inch. So when you push it against the wall to measure, it will, that push will allow for the thickness of the little piece of metal. So that piece of metal is a 1/16 inch wide. So it'll bump it in a 1/16 so that it's still an accurate measurement. But then if you're pulling the tape measure, like Emily, if you pull it from the outside, yep. So if you're pulling it, you don't need to allow for the thickness of that piece of metal. So the little piece of metal will slide out a 1/16, which will still keep your measurement accurate. So it allows for that thickness of that piece of metal, and it keeps your, it's super confusing since you're not all sitting there with a tape measure in front of you, but it keeps it so it's accurate. So it should wiggle. That if that tape measure doesn't wiggle, it's not an accurate tape measure and you should get a new one.
Yeah. This is useful too. Like really what it's determining is where the 0 point is, right? Do you want your 0 point to be here on the inside or on the outside? So if I'm measuring like in between two walls and I'm pushing against it, I want my 0 to be on the outside. But if I'm measuring something like this and I want the full length, then I want the 0 point of my tape measure to be the inside of the clip. So that little amount of movement allows you to get both. That's called true 0. So fun facts about tape measures. And then I have a couple hand tools. I have a hammer, always a staple. This is a 16-ounce hammer, which is a pretty standard and useful weight. I think anything less than that is kind of useless. I have a quick clamp. This is a quick release bar clamp. There's other kinds of clamps that have like a screw mechanism, lots of different options, but we like this one because you can use it with one hand. So this is like a one hand operation. The little one loosens it, the big one tightens it. These, I think this is like a 16-inch or 18-inch, but they come in all different lengths. And then I have a drill and a driver, our favorite tools. So I was just talking to someone about this and why we believe it's useful to have both of these tools. So a lot of folks will have just a drill. They own a drill, they use it to drill holes. They also use it to put in screws. And some of the features on a drill, like this torque collar that has different numbers on it, and this 1-2 setting at the top, these things are really only important if you are using your drill to put in screws. But I believe, and I think Allison also believes, that actually the tool you should be using to put in screws is it's called an impact driver. And an impact driver, its only job is to put in screws, and it has a mechanism inside. Some people also call this a hammer drill, even though, well, impact driver. And it helps you not strip your screw heads. It will apply extra torque to put your screws in well, and it will also sort of self-regulate it so it doesn't, you don't end up with a screw head that has a stripped and unusable head. I'm sure this has happened to some of you. So we recommend having a drill and a driver and the corresponding bits. And I know Allison's favorite brand of driver is Makita. We have Ryobi's, and then the ones we give to girls are DeWalt's, but happy to talk to you about brand names also. And then I have some various hardware. I'm not going to go too much into this, but I am going to say that if you go buy screws, don't buy Phillips head, buy Star bit. They're so much better. They have more gripability, there's more surface area, and they're less prone to stripping because they just grab much more easily. So that's, there are actually more tools than this in the kits that we give to girls, but I think that a lot of the things I just showed are going to be useful for the vast majority of things you're doing around the house. And I think Allison has some power tools to add to the list.
Yeah, so I have tons of power tools, but yes, Makita is my brand. I just think that they're lighter, they're powerful, Love Makita. This is a jigsaw. So if you want to cut curves in wood and get a little bit more creative, this is a really versatile tool. It's pretty easy to use, super fun. I'm obsessed with a multi-tool. So it looks kind of like this. This blade can point in any direction. It can cut through metal, wood. It can do flush cuts, which means like if I want to cut the bottom of a door jamb out, you can put this on the ground and just cut it out. And it makes it so you don't have to pull the whole piece of wood off, get your saw, cut it. It lets you do things without taking things apart. It's a very great tool. I love it. I even can take grout out in between tiles with this thing, and you don't have to scrape by hand. You can just put a certain bit on it and it'll take the grout out so I can re-grout if I get a little mold or something. And then I'm also obsessed with this is a little router. And my students, when I teach students how to use a router, it's like they call it the magic tool, because a router is it's like this little bit. They got all these different types of bits, and it puts a cool contour on the edge of your board. So if you ever see like a nice desk and it's got a decorative like edge, it was done with a router, and it's super easy. Love it. Yeah, and those are like the basic tools that I have. I have a grinder in front of me. If you got to cut metal, I use this thing all the time. And then I think the most basic that everyone should have is a palm sander. Palm sander, you don't have to sand by hand, and you can just sand, get a little extra power behind it. There are many other power tools, but I don't want to take up all your time. If you have questions on anything, I can probably go show you, bring it in front of you, or you just let me know.
2 fun feminist tool facts. Did you show a circular saw? You did.
Yeah, I didn't show the circular saw, and I left it in the bedroom because I thought, I left it because I was gonna do the interview in my bedroom, like in my office, but I moved and it's not with me. Sorry.
Amazing. Okay, so this is a circular saw. Sometimes it's called a skill saw. Skill saw is a brand name. But skill saw, circular saw, invented by a woman, Tabitha Babbitt. Woo! Another fun saw that I'm gonna just turn so you can see it. The saw that is over, let's see if I can point to it. Ooh, wait, there, bandsaw. So that's our bandsaw. Also not invented by a woman, but perfected by a woman who figured out how to make the bands welded and smooth so that they didn't break all the time. So our colleague Bethany, who's upstairs right now, has a lot of knowledge about the feminist history of tool manuals and tools. And so don't think that power tools only came from men. Yeah. So yeah, we could go on about all the things in front of us, but I know some of you had questions that you sent either by email or maybe have based on what we just said. Random hardware store questions are always welcome. Tell us what you're working on. How can we help? What are you wondering about? And maybe I'll ask Bethany to field some of the questions as they come in. I'll just take this first one from Cindy/Lauren. What's the best tool to take old paint or stain off of wood?
Want me to grab it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are gonna get paint off, there are all different types of paint scrapers, or putty knives, these are also called. But if you're to take stain off of wood, you're gonna have to sand it. You're gonna need, you can sand by hand, but you'll be sweating and it'll take a lot of time. If you have a palm sander, you're just gonna do a nice sand until the stain's removed, and then you can restain it or repaint it. Paint, you can't really sand paint. You can, but you'll clog up the sandpaper and you'll have to change your sandpaper a lot. So if you're taking paint off something, you should get like a paint remover, and then you'll scrape it with this and get as much of the paint off that way, and then you'll sand.
Allison, do you ever use a heat gun to help peel it before you scrape it?
I have never used the heat gun. No.
I've seen that done before.
It kind of bubbles it up.
Yeah, I always get nervous removing. I mean, this goes to the next question that I see, which is best respirators for teens, question mark. I was just going to say, like, whether you're removing stain with a sander or paint with any of these techniques, like, always useful to be wearing the right respiratory protection, because you just don't know what's in it. Like, there could be lead in the paint. The wood could be super old and have, I mean, could be all kinds of chemicals in the stain. Deborah's question about respirators, I guess it sort of depends what protection you need it against. I mean, the N95 masks actually are great. However, they're also in super high demand right now for obvious reasons. But I think what Allison just grabbed is an actual respirator like this that has replaceable cartridges.
Yeah, this thing, an N95, you know, if I do insulation work or I'm in an attic all day or in a crawl space, that N95 gets so itchy. I get sweaty. It's so uncomfortable. This thing, I can wear this all day. It's much easier to breathe. It's comfortable. It doesn't give me a rash around my face. It's hard to talk with. People can't really hear you. So that's the only drawback. But this thing is the best respirator I have found. And I can put the brand name. It's a GVS, but I don't know much more about that. If you just Google it, they'll tell you which these little respirator pads come out and you just change them. So you never have to get a new mask. You just reuse it and you just take out the filters. It's pretty awesome.
All right, wonderful.
Oh, go ahead, Bethany.
Okay, I was gonna say the next question is one someone sent in prior, and it's how to choose the best lumber for your project.
Ooh, this is a good question. So maybe it would be useful to first differentiate between lumber and other types of wood like plywood or particle board. So I have a couple different pieces. I'll just show a couple of things really quick. So lumber in general means a piece of wood that was cut at a specific dimension directly out of a tree trunk. So this is a 2x4. This is a redwood 2x4 actually. And so you'll notice, like, you can see the actual tree rings and the grain of the wood. This is the segment that was cut directly out of a tree trunk. It also has a specific dimension. So some people also call this dimensional lumber. So this is a 2x4, but here's where it gets very sneaky. So you would think that maybe this is 2 inches and maybe this is 4 inches, that you would be right to think that, but in real life, it's actually 1.5 by 3.5. So why would the lumber industry do this to us? It's so confusing. Also, a 2x2 is not 2x2, it's 1.5 by 1.5. A 1x10 is not 1x10, it's 3/4 by 9.25. So there is a reason that they do this. So when they cut down the tree, and I'm going to try to find a supporting graphic as I'm describing this to you. When they cut down a tree and they take it to the lumber mill to be milled down, there's a lot of different ways in which they cut up that trunk. Here is a graphic. So that's like the cross section of a tree trunk. There's different patterns in which they cut it out to get different pieces of lumber. When they cut the pieces out, so let's say they got 16 2x4s out of a single redwood trunk, they do cut it at 2 inches by 4 inches. And then 2 things happen to that wood. It goes and it dries. So it loses moisture and it shrinks. So now it's not 2x4, it's slightly smaller. And then in order to standardize it, the lumber companies will run them through another machine to mill everything down to the standard size 1.5, 3.5. So you can never depend on a 2x4 being 2x4, but it'll always be 2.5, 3.5. That's important, especially for when you're doing, like, let's say, framing out like planter box or thing. And you have to allow for the dimension of the leg or something. If you dimension that at 2 inches and then you install it and it's only 1.5 inches, it's gonna mess you up. So that's the first thing about lumber. The other thing I'll say is that there's different kinds of lumber, right? Like this is redwood, this is a pine 1x4, And then this is a Douglas fir 2x2. We can talk about types of wood in a minute. Then there's also plywood, which, as the name would imply, has multiple layers. It's like 2-ply paper towel, right? So this is a 5-ply plywood. This is not a great grade of plywood, but this is just layers of wood that have been laminated and glued together. It's actually really cool. This is a cool thing to Google or like image search, is the way they get these like huge sheets of wood to laminate is they take a trunk, like a tree trunk, and they put it almost like on a rotisserie spit. And then there's like a long blade, like a razor cutting edge, and they roll the trunk and the wood comes off in a sheet. And then one of the really useful things about plywood is that when they glue it together, they're gluing it in such a way where the grain of the wood is going in alternating directions, which makes it super strong. So unlike lumber that has like a grain running in this direction, it's going to be stronger in one direction than the other. The plywood, because it has that alternating grain and different grades all smushed together, it doesn't have like a specific, it doesn't have a weak direction. And most plywood comes in really, really large sheets. A full sheet is 4 feet by 8 feet. Yeah, and then there's other things like, I don't know if you can see the wood that is the backing of our tool wall is called OSB. It's oriented strand board, and it's basically just like wood chips that are all glued together. And then there's other kinds of particle board, MDF, that are like byproducts of the lumber mill that are all mushed and glued and pressed together. They often have a lot of like formaldehyde or other bad chemicals in them. So yeah, I don't know. So you want to talk about your favorite woods and when you might use them?
You want me? So there's interior, outerior, or exterior jobs, and everything in construction is to fight water. So water ruins everything. So outside, there's a wood called pressure treated lumber. Not good for planter boxes or anything you're growing food in because it's all chemicals. They basically take a standard Douglas fir 2x4 or 2x8, whatever the size, and they actually soak it in a lot of chemicals that fight off water so they don't mold and they won't rot as fast. Bugs won't want to eat them. So pressure treated is like all the framing of a deck. Anything that is exposed to the outside will be pressure treated lumber. Then you have decks that have redwood or cedar. Those are two naturally, those woods naturally are very good against water, and bugs don't want to eat them. They're just naturally like that. So they're not chemical. So if you're building a planter box, that is what you'd want to use, is cedar or redwood. And then interior, it's just plain old Douglas fir, studs or pine. I mean, if you're going to do furniture, you're going to get into the hardwoods, which are, oak, maple, cherry. There's so many different types of wood. It's not funny. So if you're doing like an art piece or a cutting board or something that needs to be crazy durable and that it's out for show, you'll want to use one of those really nice hardwoods. But if it's like just a stud in the wall, framing for your wall, Doug fir, it's the cheapest and very strong wood. So I don't know if that answers your question or if you have any more.
Yeah, Douglas fir also, I mean, I'm going to grab something as I'm talking, but we just did a project with girls that actually there's a young person in the Zoom right now named Tova. Hi, Tova, who just finished this project. It was a hairpin leg table, and we made the top by gluing pieces of Douglas fir. So you might think like, oh, Douglas fir is just, for framing, it's kind of junky. But it actually came out really beautifully, and it was like nicely sanded, and that's just glued and clamped, and then it was cut into a tabletop, routed the edges, and you can actually do a lot with wood that you might not think looks great at the hardware store, but there's all kinds of things you can do to it to make it look nice.
Yeah, you can Google 2x4 furniture, and it's insane what people do with just Doug fir 2x4s, which is the cheapest lumber out there. yeah, you can do some really fun things with that wood.
Oh, and different Tova. I'm so sorry, but I do recognize you also, Tova, with an H. Hi. And then Tova had a question also. I want to hang a plant from the ceiling. How should I do this?
Okay, so if you can find a rafter, which is basically what ceilings are made out of, they're pieces of wood that run every 16 inches. So if you can find one of those to directly put the screw in, then you're set. It'll be great. You're just going to get like an eye hook, which is actually, I think I have one. Something like this. There's a big one. They have these in all different sizes. Yep. You're going to pre-drill, which means you're going to drill a hole slightly smaller than the shaft of whatever you're putting in, and you're going to get that directly in that rafter, and you're good. If you don't have a rafter and it's just sheetrock, you can't put a screw in sheetrock and expect it to hold. It will just pull right out. You have to use something called an anchor. Good thing I know my tool cabinet pretty well to be able to find all this stuff. So they got two types that I like. These are anchors. And what they are is you screw these into the sheetrock, and then you can put the screw into this, and this anchor will keep it in the sheetrock so it doesn't pull out. So I recommend the metal ones, but plastic are actually really strong. Like I was hanging curtain rods for someone, and they had put the screws through the sheetrock and the curtain rods were pulling right out of their sheetrock. I just replaced all of the areas with an anchor, and it's super strong now. So you want to get some of these anchors.
How would you find a rafter if you didn't, like, what tool would you use to find a rafter? A rafter is also like, I was just talking about finding studs in your wall and that they're 16 inches apart. The rafters are like the studs of your ceiling. They're like the structural beams in your ceiling. So, but Allison's right. Like you would want to be able to find one so you can screw into it. And there's a couple different ways you can do that.
Yeah. So, what do I got here? Okay. So we'll start with the cheapest way is you get a little finish nail. A finish nail is a super skinny, small, it's not invasive. It's a very small nail. You take your hammer or your hand and you knock on your wall, and it'll sound like very hollow. And then you'll get to your stud or your rafter and it'll kind of sound a little bit more dense. So I find studs a lot just by knocking. That's tricky because, you know, if you can't, you're not used to doing it, you're not going to hear the difference. So knocking is number one. Number two is you take a finish nail, take your tape measure from the corner of your wall or ceiling, from a corner, pull it, go 16 inches, and just tap the nail through the sheetrock with a hammer. And if you feel it hit a rafter or a stud, it's going to be hard to hammer in. If it goes right through, then you're not on a piece, you didn't find a rafter or a stud, and you're going to have to pull your tape from the other side of the wall because you don't know how your walls were built. But you do know they were built every 16 inches. There should be a piece of wood every 16 inches, but you don't know which direction they built it from. So if it doesn't work in one direction, you just pull from the other side and you should be able to locate a rafter like that. Or you can go buy a stud finder. I think these are like $30. You put it against your wall and you slowly move it and it'll start beeping when it knows there's a stud there. So if you want to be precise, you can just get a stud finder.
I've also seen it done with a magnet because the way that drywall is attached to studs, they use a metal fastener. And so if you take just a strong magnet and run it across the wall, and if you feel something magnetic, that means there's a fastener there that attaches the drywall into the stud or rafter.
That's a great one. And I have they sell those little magnets.
They're like, yeah.
They're really strong. I have it in my toolbox over here. I don't want to take any more time, but yeah, you just run that, like kind of just go everywhere in your wall and it'll just find the screw head. That's another way. Great.
Yeah. Oh, yay. Lamps from ceilings.
Yeah. Excellent. So I'm going to go with Alora's question, then we'll get to Divya's. And Alora, since it's kind of within this realm or genre of conversation, what do you do if you used a plastic anchor in sheetrock and it got loose? How can you fix your wall?
Okay, let's see. I'm better with visuals, so I'm finding stuff that I can show you. Hold on. Okay, so now you want to take that anchor out and repair the wall? Is that the question? Or do you want to, it says, yeah, how can you fix the wall? I'm assuming you want to repair. So you're going to get, go to the store and they have sheetrock, like putty. I call it putty. And you just take a little bit of this, you put it in the hole, smooth it out, let it dry, and then take really fine sandpaper real lightly and sand over it. And when you paint, you'll never know there was a hole there.
What if you wanted to reuse what spot was the spot and you needed to remove the broken or loose anchor and reuse the hole?
Then, ooh, there's so many different ways. Okay, so it depends on what you're putting, how much weight is getting held. That would be my first thing. But do this, and then when it's completely dry, just re-drill with the anchor. That should work if you're doing lighter weight stuff. Otherwise, what I would do is I would actually cut out a piece of the sheetrock, replace it, but I'd put a thin piece of wood behind it. And then when I go to screw in, I'll have wood there. But that's like a little bit more advanced, and I don't know what, you know, it all depends on like the weight and what you're doing. So it's hard to answer that in more depth.
There's lots of different ways to, I wrote about this in the book, like depending on the size of the hole, right? Like what Allison just described is small hole, like you literally just putty it and repaint it. There's also like patches, like drywall patches that you can buy. It's like a Band-Aid for your wall.
Yeah.
And then there's this other technique that Allison's describing where you cut a square out of your drywall and you patch the whole thing. Some people call that the California patch, but that's a bigger endeavor.
Now there also are things called toggle bolts like this. This is how they hang kitchen cabinets. This little bolt right here, I don't remember the weight value on this one particular, but this thing can hold a lot of weight. Like your kitchen cabinets, you stack plates and glasses in there, they have to be super strong. So what you could do is not repair that hole, and you could put a toggle in it. So you put this screws in. When it pushes through the hole, these toggles bend like this. They go into the hole and then they open. Whoops, this isn't the right screw for this. That's why it's coming off. But if you could imagine, I wouldn't be able to pull it back out. So then when you tighten this, the surface area gets, this squeezes the sheetrock to whatever you're screwing in on this side, and it creates this ridiculously strong hold. So that would be another way you could just reuse that bigger hole to hang whatever you're hanging, which I don't know what that is, but yeah.
Okay, next question is from Divya. If I want to get a good work table that can hold the weight of a vise, how would I go about making it?
Ooh, I guess it depends what kind of vise, like a big engineer's vise or something super, super heavy.
Yeah, like,
versus
I have this one.
Yeah. I guess I was going to say that you could build a really basic table top frame, and like, again, depending on your vise, you could frame out like maybe using a 4x4 if you needed that much depth, like a 4x4. If we remember from 2x4 lesson, a 4x4 is 3.5 by 3.5 square. So you could use that size of lumber and frame out like a rectangle with some cross beams and put a piece of plywood over it. And then you could build 2 really simple sawhorses. That's a project that's in my book. And then just put the tabletop on top of that. But I'm not sure how burly you need the vise to be or the table. I also have worked on tables that are 1 sheet of plywood, like 1 good sheet of plywood over 2 sawhorses. Yeah, the tables that we have in here, I'll just see if I can pivot and show you, are carpentry and woodworking tables, benches that have built-in vices. So it sort of depends what kind of vise you need, what you're clamping, what you need to hold with it. If it's for woodworking, if it's lightweight wood, if it's metal, if you're sawing, but I think a really basic framed lumber tabletop that has a little bit of height and weight set on top of some nice sawhorses would totally do the trick.
Excellent. The next question comes from Paloma. If I want to get rid of a burnt spot on a cabinet, is there a tool for that?
Yep, I would say we're going back to the sander. You're going to sand that area, and then you're going to restain it or paint. I don't know if it's painted. Well, if it's burnt, I don't know. You could paint it or stain it.
Or you could just stain the whole cabinet the color of the burnt spot.
Yeah, or torch
That's
it.
what I would do.
Torch the whole cabinet and give it that burnt. That's a new look now. They burn wood.
Okay. The next question comes from one before the event. How do you secure 2 pieces of wood at a right angle without a jig?
So like this? I'm guessing this is what we mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious if Allison's gonna say the same thing. My suggestion would be that you set these 2 pieces. Let's say I'm building, I don't even know what this is, like a picture frame, whatever. And I'm guessing I need to clamp these things because I'm going to attach some kind of fastener here. Or maybe I am gluing them and putting in screws. So I would say set these 2 pieces flat on a tabletop and clamp them individually to the tabletop in place and not to each other. Alternatively, you could build a really, really easy jig. You could attach 2 pieces. I only have one 2x4. You could attach 2 pieces of 2x4 to each other, just like imprecisely, and then use that as your jig to push the other 2 pieces into.
Sometimes you can use a wall too. Sometimes I'll push against the wall.
Like in a corner?
Yeah, but those all are great.
Excellent. Next question is, what's the best way to determine screw patterns?
Okay, so
let's first explain why we think this question is being asked. Yeah. So sometimes if you're attaching 2 things, here. If I'm attaching 2 pieces like this, there might be a scenario where I need to attach from this side and also from this side. And one of the worst things, most annoying things to happen is if I put a screw in here and then I forgot where I put that screw and I put a screw in here and it hits the previous screw. So I think this question is asking, how do I figure out screw patterns so I don't end up with screws that hit each other? Maybe it also means other things, but in general, I
interpret it a little different, so that's fascinating.
Like, how far apart do you put screws?
Yeah, that's how I.
Okay, you answer.
But yours is good.
More.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, I was just gonna say, anytime I have to attach something from both sides, I was just these benches I showed at the beginning that I was working on this morning. I did have to put multiple screws and then another layer and multiple screws, and so if I had put them all in the same spot, they would have hit each other. So in that situation, I did a little something like this, where on the first layer, I did a left, right, left. And then the next layer on top of that, I did a right, left, right. And then the layer on top of that, I did a center, center, center. So it's like dominoes.
Yeah.
It is the thing you should at least be mindful of where you're putting your screws. because you don't ever know, like maybe 3 steps down the line, you're going to realize you have to attach another piece. And if you don't remember where you put the screws, you could end up with a collision situation. So it is good to have a plan for where you're going to put your screws and have some kind of logic to it, so that you don't end up with like too many or things going in different directions. I think Allison had a good rule of thumb for spacing.
Yeah, so since I teach high school students, I see everything. It's crazy, you know, they don't know exactly what they're doing. So sometimes you see things that, you know, make sense to them. And so what they'll do is if they're going to screw into a 2x6, this is 5.5 inches wide, and they're going to screw this piece of wood like this, some students will put like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll put like 6 screws in to hold that. And all you need is 3. 1, 2, 3. Side, middle, side. You never want to get too close to the edge, but 3 screws. If you put more than that, you're actually weakening the lumber. And I see why the kids do it. They think the more screws they put in, the stronger it will be. But there's a point, if you go too many screws, you're actually weakening the whole product. So you don't want to go too many. A 2x4, which is 3.5 inches wide, it's just 2 screws, and that's all you need. So, that's kind of how I was thinking of patterning, but yeah.
Also, like in the project that Divya asked about, the tabletop, if you were attaching a piece of plywood onto a frame underneath it, we did this a lot when we were building this massive chicken coop with our girls here, is we would tell them like a hand length distance between each screw. Like, what is that, like 6-7 inches? Yep. If you're doing like a big sheet on top of something else, they don't need to be all up on each other. And they also shouldn't be this far apart.
Yeah, and if you're doing subfloor, which is plywood on a floor, so it depends on what you're screwing. You want screws like every 4 inches everywhere so that you don't get squeaks in the floor. So if you have a squeaky floor, they didn't put enough screws in the subfloor.
This is also a thing, just as a sidebar, there are building codes that are incredibly specific about, like, if you're framing a house or you're doing roofing, like what type of hardware you're using, exactly where it goes, what spacing, what length, what gauge. So this is a much longer and more complicated question, but I think for like home building, the instinct is to put too many screws for sure.
Good.
Thank you.
I see one
question. Yep, comes from Alora. If you're a beginner, what tools do you need to start wood carving?
Awesome. Okay, so my suggestion for wood carving is basswood. Basswood is a very soft wood, but it's not as soft as like balsa, so it's very pleasant to carve. That would be my first suggestion for wood, so basswood. My second suggestion would be to get a really nice set of chisels. There's a gouge chisel, which is like a round one. I don't have one of those, but I know Emily does.
Right here.
Yep, they're round chisels, and they are so fun I love chiseling. It's so satisfying. You should watch videos of people chiseling wood. It's like, if they're real sharp, it's just like butter. It's great. But those round chisels allow you to, my students, we always do a spoon project, so they have to carve out a spoon, which is all round. And so they get very proficient in using that round chisel. Then you have the flat ones, which if you're doing like a door jamb, I just chiseled by my pool. I put in like a trap door handle and just chiseled that out with some chisels. Yep, right there. Chiseling, that's a rubber mallet. You'll want chisel and a rubber mallet. If you want to do carving with knives, there's carving knives that you can get. Just be super careful. But there's every size chisel you can imagine. Like, there's tiny ones, there's super large ones. So you just got to kind of go to a wood specialty store, like a wood craft store, and you'll find all the chisels you need.
Oh, and related question, how can you sharpen your tools like chisels?
Okay, so sharpening it's kind of tricky. You got to get a diamond sharpener stone. It's a stone, and you got to get the angle right and very precise, and you can hand sharpen. But I only sharpen my tools if I am in like a pinch and I need it done right then and there. I at the end of like a season, I'll put a big box together with all my tools, and I'll actually just bring them to a place in San Rafael. It's a tool sharpener, and they will just sharpen them all for me. And they're like brand new when you get them back. They're so nice. So, I mean, you can look up videos on how to sharpen on a stone, and you totally can do that. It's kind of fun. You just kind of rub it against the stone. It's not that hard. It just takes some time. Or you could bring them to an actual professional sharpener.
Yeah, I just put a link in there. This is a Hita tool is right up the street from us actually here in Berkeley, and they are, I'm not sure where you are, Carolyn, but they make incredible Japanese carving tools, and they do sharpening. I wonder if, like, you know how when you go to the farmer's market sometimes and there's the knife sharpener, I wonder if that would.
I don't think
No,
so.
not.
No.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Carolyn. My suggestion is not helpful in
You're
Pittsburgh,
in Pittsburgh.
but yeah, tool sharpeners. I mean, I feel like that's a thing left to the professionals.
Yeah. Any
Another
other questions?
Yeah, and this one, I actually asked this question, but I think people can around the world can feel this. How do you navigate a hardware store without being talked down to, especially as women or non-binary people?
Oh boy. I mean,
This is a lifelong endeavor.
yeah, no matter how knowledgeable you are, just being a female, they're going to talk down to you. But I always make sure I'm in my like work clothes. So I'll wear my construction pants. Sometimes if you're the dirtier, the better. Like if I go in covered in sawdust and mud, like I was just crawling under a house, normally people leave me alone. But if I go in, I've had so many experiences in a hardware store that I just want to go crazy over. I mean, I had a guy try to tell me to buy a light bulb once. I don't know. That's a tough one. You just got to walk in with confidence, and the second they ask you if you need help, just say no. Because as soon as you say yes, or I don't know. Sometimes I say yes just to have fun with it and see like how they treat me. But yeah, that's a tough one, the hardware store.
Yeah, so I remember when I was in graduate school, I was doing this, my thesis exhibition required this like very elaborate installation of this steel armature, and I had to attach it to a concrete floor. And so, I'm like 24 years old, and I'd never done work with concrete before. And anyway, so I had to go to the hardware store, and I had to buy this very specific type of concrete screw, masonry screw. And I beforehand, I knew what it was. I went in, I had like written it down, and I said, I need this. And immediately they're like, oh yeah, it's on aisle 5. And so I also feel like, and I remember thinking, oh, that was easy. So this is actually a thing that we talk to girls about, that I think knowing how to name things and using the right vocabulary and nomenclature is really, really empowering, and knowing what things are called. This is true in life, like language matters, and being able to ask for what you need matters. But this is particularly true in spaces where I do feel like some of the language is like set up to be sort of exclusive. It's almost like, well, if you don't know the lingo, you're not in the club. So I think like preparing yourself, and like, even if you don't know exactly what you need, you could look in my book or Google it, like just having some kind of vocabulary that you're ready to walk in with and use if you need to. Yeah, language is super, super powerful. And there was a period of time where, we would have summer camp, and we would say, if you say the word thing instead of the name of the tool, you got to do push-ups. Like, we do really try to instill this in girls. I think it's a good practice in your own building projects to know the actual names of the actual things.
Yeah, I recently the most I try to go to my local hardware store where they know me. They ask me to like work there because I'm there so much. So now they just know not to like that I know what I'm doing. But there was a new guy in the electrical department, and I was trying to get all the wiring that I needed to run underground for this pool. And I was trying to ask him where the conduit was. I could not find the conduit, which is like the plastic tubing that you bury under the ground that you run the wires through. I just couldn't find it. I was like, where? And it happened, it was way up high. That's why I just didn't see it. But I went to tell the guy, he's like, oh, well, do you mind not telling me what you're doing? So I explained it to him, and he's like, you know what? I really think you should just get an extension cord. And I was like, you want me to run an extension cord across my yard where you're going to see it, and then plug I was like, I need a GFI, which we won't get into, but there's some with water and electrical, like when you have a pool, you have to have a certain type of outlet so that it's grounded so people don't get electrocuted if something happened and all this stuff. And so I was like, why is this guy telling me to get an extension cord? He's like, this is a lot of work. Like, this is you can't just do this. Like, and I was like, listen, I'm very handy. I'm extremely handy. I want to do it the right way. So I need the conduit. And he goes, do you mind showing me pictures when you're done? Like, it was like, I had to prove myself. So, it just happens. But what I do now is I just say, listen, before you answer any question, I'm very handy. So you can talk to me like you would talk to any other guy who came in here. Just, I kind of just tell them, talk to me like I know what I'm doing. That's what I do. But if you don't know what you're doing, don't be afraid to ask. Although Home Depot and Lowe's, none of those workers know anything about anything. They're just working there. So if you want to ask like an actual expert, go to your local hardware store. And they always have like someone in there that actually has done everything and knows plumbing and electrical. Do not ask Lowe's or Home Depot anything. They know nothing. That's my
one of my proudest moments is that like about 6 months ago, I was at Home Depot, and then over the course of like 15 minutes, 3 different people asked me for help. Like they thought I worked there. And I was like, oh yeah, that's 2 aisles over. And I was like, so I think some of it is like how you carry yourself. Also, if you don't know, I think that's a great suggestion. Like our local lumber yard is Ashby Lumber. Mm-hmm. They're amazing. Anyone will help you, and they know so much. And if you go to your local lumber yard / hardware store, I would say also maybe look for the woman who's working there, because she probably knows everything and then some.
Yeah.
All right, and we have one final question from Alora. How do you convince your parents to start a project? They're worried it will be too big or too messy and will need too many tools.
You give them our phone number, and then you get on FaceTime with us. I love this question, Alora. This is a great one to end on too. Allison, you want to go ahead?
Oh boy. So first of all, the last question there, if it needs too many tools. So that is real. Every job, no matter how small you think it is, it requires many, many tools. So if I go to hang a chandelier or a mirror or in someone's home, I have to pack like a bunch of tools to do those 2 simple jobs. So yes, the tool thing, just tell them you will find the tools because you'll borrow them. You'll call Emily, or you'll borrow everyone. If you get with your community, everyone has the tool you need if you just ask. Also, Berkeley has a tool library. I don't know if they still do, but when I lived in Berkeley, I used that thing daily. You can rent anything from them. It's awesome. The tool library. So that's the tool question. And you just got to tell your parents, you're trying to improve something in your home, and they got to let you do it. Maybe make a PowerPoint and do a presentation for them, right? Get real, show them your ideas, your drawings, explain all the things you want to do. The more detail, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, Alora, I don't know where you are, but there, if not Berkeley or Oakland, I feel like tool lending libraries are becoming more common, and there are a lot of hardware stores will also rent some of their tools. I was going to say the same thing about the PowerPoint. I one time had to do a PowerPoint for my parents to convince them to let me do something. It wasn't related to building. It's because I wanted pet rats, but it was very effective. So yeah, I think this kind of goes to the like hardware store question. Thinking things through, being prepared, knowing, like doing your own research ahead of time really helps to get people on your side. And I would say not even just on your side, but like they probably are going to want to help you and be jealous that you are working on this awesome project. So, and I'm not kidding, like you are welcome to email me anytime. I'm putting my email in the chat. One of my favorite things ever is helping folks figure out how to build stuff, hence Tool Talk office hours. So yeah, I think also like Pinterest is a really, really useful tool also, and just in terms of figuring out like how you want to build it or what you want it to look like. Like I was never a Pinterest person, but it's quite useful in helping to visualize some things that maybe are only living in your head. And yeah, I also really am a proponent for young people owning their own toolbox. So if maybe at first you need to sort of gather up like whatever you can find in the garage or whatever you can borrow from family friends or the tool lending library, but I think as you do one project and then you have an idea for another and another, you'll also get to a point where you're like, okay, I have to stop borrowing the level, or there's going to be a handful of tools that you know are like your tools and they're essential. So email us, and I really hope, I don't know what you're thinking about, but I hope you build it.
Yeah, I also think that you need to show your parents like you have a passion to complete the job, because not all construction, you know, some things take work and it takes persistence, and your parents want to know that you're not going to start and then not finish. So convince them that you're going to finish the job and that you're passionate about it. And I think that they would be supportive. Good.
Well, we want to thank everyone for being here. And Allison and I both love the show Car Talk. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And so this was sort of inspired by that. And so we're hoping that we can do it on an ongoing basis. But in the meantime, you're welcome to email me. Lots of resources in our book. Also, you can follow us on Instagram, which is just _Girls Garage. And yeah, last thing I wanted to just say is that like we super appreciate the community that we built, like from apparently Pennsylvania and locally. And as a nonprofit, like we're able to do these things for free, and we want to be able to. And if any of you are interested in supporting us, you can go to our website, girlsgarage.org, and learn more, or make a small donation, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all kinds of program updates. And yeah, just want to say thank you and hope to see you all soon.